Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. It's another month, another book review. So today I'm going to review what I read for the month of April, but I'm also going to backtrack and talk about The Rebel Nun, which I read in March. Alright, so in March, like I said, I read The Rebel Nun by, I'm going to say her name wrong, Marj Charlier? Someone's going to correct me. So I read this book. All I basically said in my review for March was that I didn't like it. I didn't know really how to properly critique it, so I just wanted to run by and actually provide a solid critique rather than just saying I just didn't like the book. I love reading, I love reviewing books, but I also want to make sure that if I say I don't like a book, that I provide constructive criticism. So this book is basically about a nun that lives in medieval times. She's the daughter of a king. Her mother was a concubine. Women at this time don't have a lot of options. They could either just, be a prostitute, a concubine, or there's the nunnery. There's really no other options. So, it does discuss feminism and women being in this patriarchal society, but very specifically the monastery, right? These women are living in a nunnery, but they are restricted to what the men say they can or cannot do. So the main character covets a position to be the abbess. And so although she's a nun and that she should live by certain holy rules, she definitely has these non-secular beliefs, and I think that's mainly because she doesn't really, I don't know if she's really dedicated to the role that she has. I just think she feels like this is what I had to do, this is like my only option. And so she covets a position another nun received, and I feel like that's meant to add layers to the character, to understand where she's coming from. She's a human being. She has flaws too. I just felt like I had a hard time connecting to all the characters. The pacing is really slow, and there are other books that have a slow pace that I've really enjoyed, because I felt like even if a book is slow paced, at least if I feel like during those slow moments the book is saying something, or there's a payoff down the line that warrants the slow pace, I'll enjoy it. I felt like 2/3 of this book were moving really slowly, and I felt as if it would have been beneficial if the author had handled some of the points in a different way. For instance, there's a book called There by Tommy Orange. Or what else? There's another book called This Time It'll Be Different. I can't think of the author's name. I think her name is, I think I wrote it down, Misa Segura. And I want to say, I think Interior Chinatown does the same thing by Kelvin Yu, but it's been a while since I read that. So those are all fictional books as references, but what they'll do is, in between a chapter, there'll be a list of facts, like historical facts, that's meant to create context to the story that they're saying. And when it's used correctly, it could be really effective and be incredibly impactful to the story that the author is trying to say, without creating a lag of time, So I kind of felt like there's all these things that Cleotilde was dealing with, and historical context the author was giving within the story. But instead of me enjoying that information, I just felt like it was dragging along. And even though this is a fictional narrative based on a nonfiction event, I think it would have moved the story along, made the story more impactful if she actually used that technique, rather than having a point of view that's specifically through Cleotilde, and that kind of dragged. I think the book probably would have been like half the pages if she had done that, or if there was just like a brief summary of that time and what was going on, and then jumped into the turmoil. I just think I would have enjoyed the book more. So I just wanted to say that it was kind of bothering me. I was mulling over how I was going to discuss what was really bothering me about the book, what felt lacking. So that was The Rebel Nun. And what else did I read? I did a hybrid experience of reading A Great Place to Have a War, America and Laos and the Birth of the Military CIA by Joshua Kurlantzick. So this book takes place around the time of the Vietnam War, and so it's around the 1960s. I want to say this went on for a decade. And so this is a secret, for lack of better words, a secret war that was undertaken by the military CIA. Not even Congress knew about what was going on. And the way things were handled, I almost felt, it's almost as if America just sticks their hands into other countries and like it's their little candy jar, jumbles it about and just like bounces and like, all right, you deal with the aftermath. That's what it felt like. There's definitely things that the military CIA did that there was a lot of not really telling the truth, lying basically, and saying that they're helping the Hmong people while also hurting them as well, hurting Laos. So that's the best way to summarize that. I hybrid read it with audiobook and just reading the physical copy. It's a journalistic piece. This includes declassified records. I highly suggest you read this. All the books, except for The Rebel Nun, I wasn't a fan of that. All the other books I've read are nonfiction reads. But it's really, they're all dismal, you know? They're just like pieces of history that I think it's important to know, but it's still, it's difficult at times to read. So although I read all these books in 1 month, I wouldn't suggest doing that. It was not a good feel-good month, you know? So I'll just read this run excerpt from the book, just to give you a little taste of what you'll be coming across. And then that's it. The post-9/11 war on terror also replicates the Laos War in another critical way. CIA activities go almost totally unwatched by the public and the media. The strategies used to keep most of the war on terror secret, prohibiting reporters from coming near CIA paramilitary operations, classifying even the most basic details as paramilitary campaigns, relying almost exclusively on technology, contractors, and local forces rather than U.S. ground troops, would have been completely familiar to the CIA operations running the Laos War. So it's really riveting. Again, it's a journalistic piece, and it's just one of those parts of history that I wish more people knew about. If you're interested, there's also a couple of documentaries I found on YouTube regarding the subject. The next book I read is The Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann, The Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI. How do I sum this up? The book takes place in the 1920s. As indigenous people had continued to be pushed off their land and forced into other areas. The people of Osage moved to Oklahoma, is it? Yeah, Oklahoma, where they settle there, but it turns out the people of Osage are actually right under the people of Osage is oil, so they struck wealth through oil, and the people of Osage are ridiculed in the newspapers about the fact that they have any wealth, which is so rare for an indigenous community, and their wealth there is going to be inherited through the generations. That's just what was agreed upon. So because they're discriminated against, you're also in this book going to read about how the people of Osage were policed financially. They were just treated like they can't handle their own money. So people would have guardians that would, I mean, I'm using the word guardians. I don't know what the proper word is, but people are just policing their money. It's like they're not provided the freedom to just spend however they want. So you learn about that subject, but also what starts happening is people of Osage begin to be murdered mysteriously, and no one knows why, but it really has to do with ultimately the oil, right? So the way that the writer wrote this book really captures the intention of the reader from the very first page. So it starts out focusing on the Burkhardt family, and it branches out from there. So I felt like what the writer does is he creates an intimate setting where you get to know a particular family, and then slowly branches out from there as a greater conspiracy begins to unfold. And I thought that was a great way to tackle the subject, opposed to, other journalistic pieces. Sometimes they could just be so broad that it doesn't really give the reader a chance to connect intimately with the people that are affected by the subject matter. And so I really appreciated that. And it also allows the reader to really digest the information that they're being told, because the conversation is so complicated. The author is really good at creating a tone that's filled with like tension and mystery. It reads like a fictional thriller, but unfortunately what happens is true, and it's a really crazy American conspiracy that was real and true. So I highly recommend that you read it. I'll read the first page so you kind of get an idea of how engaging the author's writing is. I mean, he really sets a tone from the very beginning. It's like the first paragraph, and it says, "The Vanishing. In April, millions of tiny flowers spread over the Blackjack Hills and vast prairies in the Osage Territory of Oklahoma. There are Johnny Jump-Ups and Spring Beauties and Little Bluettes." The Osage writer Joseph John Matthews observed that the galaxy of petals makes it look as if the gods had left confetti. In May, when the coyotes howl beneath an unnerving large moon, taller plants such as spiderworts and black-eyed Susans begin to creep over the tinier blooms, stilling their light and water. The neck of the smaller flowers break, and their petals flutter away, and before long they are buried underground. This is why the Osage Indians refer to May as a time of the flower-killing moon. That paragraph itself sets a tone for everything that happens in the story, and it's just really incredible. I really love it. It's very symbolic, so I love that book. So the next book I read is a book of poetry, and it's called When My Brother Was an Aztec by Natalie Diaz. I absolutely love the way that she writes poetry. I'm not really big on poetry. I always feel like I'm not smart enough to understand it. The way Natalie Diaz writes poetry feels more like a cohesive thread of like a long form story, but it's in poetry, and at least that's how I felt about her work, and I really enjoyed it. So this collection talks about family dynamics, addiction, love, and intimacy with a dark sense of humor, and I really enjoyed it. I can't recommend it enough. I'll read anything that she writes. So the next book that I read is very short, packs a punch, and I couldn't read it all in one sitting. I had to break it up and read it between books because it's just a very heavy subject matter, and it just had my imagination going wild. It's another nonfiction piece. It's a journalistic research, and it's called Nazi Nexus by Edwin Black, America's Corporate Connection to Hitler's Holocaust. He's a best-selling author of IBM and the Holocaust. I've seen this author talk about IBM's connection to the Holocaust before, and that just had me riveted and wanting to read all his books. This particular book is a condensed version of a couple of books that he's researched and written, and he just compiled it into this particular book so that as a reader I could see all the different connections between these American corporations and their contributions to Nazi occupied Germany. It was a hard read because even though it's told in a way it's a journalistic piece, it's really dry and straight to the point. For instance, the author talks about how in Nazi occupied Germany at that time, the way that laws were placed, people were trying to find loopholes to protect their children. So let's say a person has a child, then they go to court and they pay someone who is not Jewish to say that the child that woman had is actually theirs, even though it's a lie and they're married. They're like, oh, I had this child, I cheated on my husband, I had him out of wedlock, just so they had some sort of protection for their child. Another thing that this book touches upon is eugenics, forced sterilization of women, how IBM created a census form that enabled during the Holocaust for people to be even identified as Jewish. I mean, it's really horrible, but I'm glad that I read it because in history, I do know that the Holocaust happened, and we look at it as just Nazi occupied Germany, but we don't really take into account who contributed this. Like, how did this, asking how it happened is not a simple answer. There are a lot of contributing factors to this happening, and I feel like it's really important to understand that the corporations that can contributed to what happened, so that maybe we'll keep our eyes open to these type of situations now, and how we could make sure that something like that never happens again, if that's even possible. I don't know. I highly recommend it, but don't read it in one sitting. It's a lot. It's very heavy. I don't know. It's a lot on the psyche. So I'll tell you that. The last book I read is a comic, and it's Saga. This is like one of my favorite series. I'm just doing a reread. Every month I pick books based on a particular theme, but this is going to be separate from my theme, although this is somewhat connected to what I read anyways, right? So Saga Volume 1 is about Alana, who's a soldier, and Marco, who is a prisoner of war. So he is her ward, I think that's how you say it. They fall in love, become fugitives, have a child together, And from the very first issue in this volume, Alana's giving birth. They're in hiding, and amongst this war, people are trying to find them. There's a bounty on their head, and from the very first issue, she's giving birth. But at the end of that first issue in the first volume, there's a death, and there's a lot of different. There's a cost of war. There's a cost of these people wanting to be together against this universe that just doesn't want them to be together. It's very Romeo and Juliet mashed with Star Wars. There's a lot of heart. I think I already said in my video when I said I was going to read this, I kept saying parenting because that really stuck in my mind. So yes, it's very much about parenting. The author has said himself that once he became a parent, there's just so much that he would wanted to talk about, but he also doesn't want to talk off someone's ear. So he just really put it into his work. But it really does speak to pacifism, because now they don't even want to, both these characters don't even want to ever pick up a gun again. Generational trauma, the price of war, and which includes prostitution and people being forced to do things that they don't want to do, poverty, politics, found family, and just, how strangers will help you along the way at times when you don't think that's possible anymore to live in that particular world. The story is told in an omnipresent point of view. So the child that both characters have is named Hazel. So she at times will insert herself into the dialogue. She's basically like the narrator. But what I really appreciate about this writer is that he doesn't lean too heavily on the narration to get something across. Whenever Hazel says something, it's very deep or is a little breadcrumb about what's to come, rather than the author relying on it too much just to get across what's going on. She's not really used for clarification or anything like that, which I really appreciated. Because even in movies, sometimes when there's narration, there can be an over narration that's really not neat. I should be able to tell what's going on within the story visually or through the dialogue. And Brian K. Vaughan is just really good at that. So yeah, those are all the books that I read for the month of April, if I remember which month it is. I enjoyed every single one. They were really enlightening. And when I say enjoy, I enjoyed Saga, and I enjoyed the poetry collection. The other ones were just a really good read for someone like me that just wants to know more about history, especially when it happens to be like declassified information. I find that fascinating, but it definitely made me feel like gloom and doom. So maybe don't read them all in the same month. Don't do what I did, because I was not good. All right, everyone. If you're watching this, thank you. May is here, and the review for that will be coming soon. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I'll talk to you later.